Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Lifetime Talks Training Podcast. And, today's going to be a great episode. We've got some information and some technology. First and foremost, technology is hands down one of the biggest fitness trends, in the industry right now for health and fitness. And this particular product allows you to see the stress that you don't even realize that you may have, which leads to not getting results and injuries and all these things. So even with the best intentions, if you're working out a ton and you're not getting the results, this is the product that you're going to want to look at. And for many reasons, health and fitness. So I've got the VP of Performance Science at Whoop, who's also a PhD candidate, Kristen Holmes. And I'd like to just welcome you to the show, Kristen.
Hi there. It's great to see everyone.
Awesome. We were talking before we started to record, about some of your background, and I'd love for you to share your background, that allows you to be specifically a, kind of a master coach, expert in this particular area.
Yeah, well, I actually was a coach for, a few years at the University of Iowa. And then I went on to coach. I was a head coach at Princeton University, where I coached for 13 seasons. So did all the programming and really A to Z, so all the technical and tactical aspects, and a lot of the physiological programming, and as we were using tons of technology in our environment. But yeah, that's kind of where I got really into this concept of using technology to foster performance, and saw it as just an unbelievable source of insight to really understand how the body is adapting or not adapting to, the volume and intensity that I was putting on the athletes. And then more broadly, I was an Olympic level athlete, played 2 sports at the University of Iowa. So I was, an athlete myself. And then just academically, I've been really deep into both the physiological and psychological factors in terms of how they influence our attentional capacity and our motivation, and our effective effort, and our arousal levels. So I've been deep inside that science. Yep. I got a master's, and then I'm a PhD candidate and in psychology, and but really looking at a lot of circadian factors and kind of this concept of circadian alignment, how that influences all the metrics really we track at Whoop. So heart rate variability and resting heart rate, recovery and sleep.
Perfect. Well, I was an Iowa guy. Well, I was on the Illinois side, though. I went to school at Augustana, Quad Cities, and spent many a times up 45 minutes north in Iowa City. That was a fun time. I wish we had Whoop back then, or maybe I don't.
I know, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
I think I'd rather know, though.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and that's the key is, there's so many things that we don't realize. So many times I've said, "Oh, I'm not stressed." This you can't lie with this, so why don't you start to dive into a little bit, obviously Whoop is the product, but it tracks, you mentioned heart rate variability, resting heart rate, and sleep performance. Why don't we start with HRV, because a lot of people might not know what heart rate variability is.
Yeah, well, I think it's exactly to your point. We don't necessarily understand how we're adapting to external stress. And external stress comes in a lot of forms, and stress isn't inherently bad, but if we go for long periods of time without proactively managing that stress, it becomes chronic stress, which leads to fatigue and burnout, injury, illness, right? Like that's the bad kind of stress. Yep. So, Whoop helps you with using this metric of HRV. It kind of gives you a snapshot of how you're adapting to external stress. And we want to try to adapt as functionally as possible. So when there are big deviations off of your baseline, okay, so let's say you come in and your baseline HRV is 50. And let's just say you had a really big workout and maybe, you're in the heat, maybe a little dehydrated, you have a big fight with your spouse. Well, the next day, the chances are your heart rate variability is going to be on the lower side. Yep. Because you had a lot of stress and unless you dealt with that stress proactively, maybe did a cycle of meditation or, got yourself rehydrated, buffered it with a really good night's sleep, unless you're taking all those measures, the chances are it's going to show up in your heart rate variability the next day, which would, and, as I said, would be some sort of deviation, a negative deviation off your baseline, a reduction in your heart rate variability. Yep. So that's just an indicator that, whatever stress you took on yesterday, you didn't adapt to it in a very functional way. Yep. So I think for most folks who are kind of scared of this truth, why it's important is that I would rather know tomorrow that, like the stuff I did yesterday didn't serve me, right? Yep. So I can approach my day just differently, right? And get back on track, as opposed to 6 months down the road when I'm like depressed and have gained 10 pounds and haven't worked out in, 6 weeks. Like, you can be way more proactive, right? And ask better questions of yourself, better questions of your behavior, and really just start to like surround yourself with stuff that really serves you, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Well, and the big thing too is some people might not understand, heart rate variability now has become, God, I remember 7, 8, 9
Yeah.
years ago, maybe somewhere in there, it was like a foreign thing. Obviously it was the Russian, it was Omega wave, right? That was
Yeah,
like
well,
this
they were
big
using
thing.
it in prenatal care, so
Yep.
it's been around for like 4 decades, I think. And the Russians, I think,
Yep.
popularized it, for kind of more athletic performance. But yeah, it's a metric that's been around forever. And yeah, I mean, now we can track it with super
Yep.
high fidelity and give you a real sense of actually what's happening physiologically.
Yeah. And would you just kind of surface level explain what it actually looks at, the timing and the rhythm between each beat and things like
It's
that?
it's the interval of time between heartbeat. It's the measurement of that time, and you want to have the healthier, and it's a reflection of your autonomic nervous system. So it originates in the heart. It's a function of the heart. Heart rate variability is a function of the heart, but it originates in the autonomic nervous system. Your autonomic nervous system has two branches: parasympathetic and sympathetic, and they're both fighting or trying to send signals to the heart. Right? The more healthier your autonomic nervous system, the more responsive your heart will be to the demands of both the parasympathetic and sympathetic. So I need to fight or flight. My heart's going to be responsive to that. I'm going to jack up my heart rate, and I'm going to be able to, fight and flight.
Yep.
If I need to rest and digest, my parasympathetic branch is going to send a signal to the heart, and my heart is going to respond to that. So imagine if I'm really under recovered, really tired, really burnt out, my heart is not going to be responsive to the demands. Imagine just a really sluggish autonomic nervous system. Okay, so my reaction time isn't as great. My mobility is not as good. My speed, my cognitive thinking, my executive functioning, all of that is going to be compromised.
Yeah, and that is indicative of a consistency and an inconsistency in the heartbeat, right? And so the more, if I'm right, the more consistent, the more stressed you are versus the balance going back and forth, correct?
You want a lot of variability,
Yep.
right? And a higher heart rate variability is better.
Yep.
Right. So a high heart rate variability, but what's most important though for folks to understand it, this is all relative to your own baseline.
Yep.
Right. So high, I'll be green if, my heart rate variability is in the hundreds, right? In the low hundreds. Whereas, you might be green if your heart rate variability is in the 50s, right? It just depends. It's
And
really,
the technology takes care of understanding that.
it learns your own physiology. This is not, global population level averages. Like this is truly like what is unique to your physiology and what is unique to me.
Yeah. And it's crazy too, because when I did use, the product, it was the nights that, I may went out, stayed up too late.
Yeah.
It wasn't the days that I crushed myself in a workout necessarily that were my worst readings. It was the night I went out, I probably drank too much, I didn't sleep. And, it's common amongst people. And so, we'll get into what do you do with the information a little bit later, but it's so crazy that, it can tell. So, from a trainer, there's a big audience here that are trainers or even health enthusiasts. If you're getting repetitive injuries, if you're not performing the way that you think you should, this could be the reason why.
You bring up such an important point. And it was honestly, this was like literally the inspiration of why I joined Whoop 5 years ago. Is, I was collecting loads of data in my environment, right? We had a very competitive program. I coached field hockey. We won 12 Ivy League championships in 13 seasons. So we were doing really well. We were doing a lot of things that a lot of folks weren't doing, right? Collecting all sorts of data. But one of the really things I could never figure out is there was very, very, very little relationship between what they did in training. Okay. So let's say you're, the trainer's lifetime, they, go out, they crush their client for an hour and a half even. Yeah. Okay. Same thing. I apply a lot of volume intensity to my athletes over, 2-hour training period. Well, that 2-hour training period did not at all predict next day readiness or recovery. And it was like, oh my God, it has nothing
but
to
I'm
do
so
with
sore, I can't move. Right?
no, but
Yeah,
it wasn't, in a maintenance phase where you're
Yeah.
not like functionally overreaching.
Yeah.
That's not what predicts readiness tomorrow. It's nothing that your trainers are doing to their client that's going to predict next day recovery. And we see this in the Whoop data, in the last 5 years, it's just abundantly clear that there's very little relationship. It is, to your point, it is the other 23 hours that they are not with their client that influences how they show up tomorrow.
Yep.
So this is like bigger than obviously just, Whoop. What inspires me so much about it is it helps you show up for life, not just, for the workout that you're doing an hour a day, but, how you engage with your family and as a professional, like how much energy and joy, and do you bring to your life, and all of that, there's technology that helps us understand just how to apply our efforts, right? So we're not I don't want to spend hours thinking about what choices I need to make. Like, I know what serves me and I know what doesn't very clearly.
And and that's what it does. I mean, it helps you understand if you can't manage the external stresses outside of exercise, let's just keep that one to the side for now. Whether it's financial, whether it's kids, whether it's, all of those things, you don't realize what that does. And it doesn't mean don't work out. It means based on your reading, which we'll get into, you can adjust. So, but one of the things I want to bring it back to the technology is you look not only at HRV, but resting heart rate and then sleep performance. Would you mind explaining, how you track? I mean, obviously resting heart rate's fairly simple, but sleep performance. Yeah. And then, how does it take everything to give you, what you should do? And let's get into kind of what can you do based on a red, yellow, green score?
For sure. Yeah, we kind of pulled out heart rate variability, but heart rate variability actually is one of the inputs to the Whoop recovery score. Yep. So the member wakes up in the morning, they see a score, it's green, yellow, or red, and that's basically just a signal of how well your body coped with yesterday's stress, right? And it's, red is not a death sentence, yellow doesn't mean you can't train, but green means you're really primed to adapt. To external stress. So that's kind of like loosely like how it's bucketed. And then what goes into the recovery score is heart rate variability, resting heart rate, respiratory rate, and sleep performance. And what we've seen in just the myriad of case studies that we've done is that no single one of those metrics independently are more predictive of performance than Whoop recovery than those four together. So the algorithm is is what we own at Whoop.
Yeah. When you say four, what I've only had three. I had heart rate variability, resting heart rate, and sleep performance.
Respiratory rate.
Oh, respiratory rate. Okay.
Yeah. So it's those, and they're all weighted differently based on, there's a whole boatload of physiological reasons why, for example, you'd weight heart rate variability at the top of the list and why you'd rate resting heart rate at the second. So we have different weights. And those that in Whoop recovery correlates to pool time, pool times, track times, ice hockey efficiency, free throw percentage, executive functioning, and working memory. So we've been able to take, this, and so that's what makes it so useful, right? Is that it actually predicts performance levels, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. And, so, I always say that, getting back to the workout side of it a second, your workout is only as good as your recovery. And so many people don't understand, especially younger kids, right? And, with what they want to eat, versus taste versus what they need. And, these things are just, it's so powerful to have that. But, one of the other things you guys talk about is strain and the strain, is it a strain coach? Would you mind going into what you define as strain and how it works?
Yeah, strain coach is just a brilliant feature. I think at the core, like, unless the insight is actionable, it's just data for the sake of data, and I think that's what's really cool. When you wake up in the morning, based on your recovery, based on your capacity, Whoop will tell you how much strain, i.e. how much volume and intensity, how much cardiovascular load you can put on your body to then not compromise next day's recovery. So it's again, it's not just workout strain, it's day strain, right? And And to kind of go back to this concept of, it's not just the hour and a half or the 2 hours or the hour that you're training that is most predictive. It's this cumulative effect of strain across the day, which is not trivial, right? It absolutely adds up. So we quantify both of that. So we'll know going into your workout how much day strain you've already accumulated. And then we'll be able to tell you how much more you can put on your body to kind of stay within the safe limits, right?
Yep.
So if you go so much further, your chances of dampening your immune system or, potentially injuring yourself, like it starts to increase, right? Like the further you get, the bigger that delta goes between your recovery level and your capacity, your capacity and your strain. The more that delta grows, okay, the more chance things can go wrong, right? So we help you with our strain coach. We help keep that delta within safe limits.
And does it just dictate volume and intensity, or how does it give you that information? What does it
basically cardiovascular load. So if you have your phone with you, you can literally watch your strain build in real time.
Okay.
And we will tell you when you've reached your kind of strain limit. And it says if you want to functionally overreach, i.e. you want to get fitter, you can put on a little bit more strain, right? To kind of just get that sweet spot of overexertion so you can make some, bigger fitness gains.
Got it. So it's based on you said cardiovascular load.
Yep.
Obviously there's strain, there's stress strain from a neurological, neuromuscular. And so is it saying that you're almost better off increasing intensity versus increasing volume? So don't bring as much volume into your workout. You might just want to go a little bit heavier, or putting a little bit more of a neurological strain versus a cardiovascular strain.
No question. And all the Russian science,
which could be counterintuitive to some people because they're like, I'm exerting myself.
No, you're dead on. Low heart rate variability. There's no connection between low heart variability and being able to hit PRs in the weight room. So that is exactly how I use it. I use this, kind of Russian research, HRV research from, a couple of decades ago. And it has honestly proven, in my situation to be absolutely spot on. Like I do exactly what you are saying. I reduce my volume. I just ramp up my intensity. I do a short workout, heavy weights, and then I'm done.
Got it.
And what happens is I'm not taxing my cardiovascular system as much. And that seems to really help.
But that's a topic that could cause strain mental for some people because they think if they lift heavy, they might get too big in one set or in one. Oh. I'm just joking. It's.
Yeah, no, I know that is a barrier. But I think too, and that goes, I think women, I'm a woman and I identify as a woman and, I definitely, I wouldn't say that I'm scared of building muscle, but there was a point in time where I was not educated enough to realize that that's not really what happens. Like physiologically, you have to really, really lift a lot
and eat and
load food in a very intentional way in order to build the kind of muscle that would be.
That's a topic for another great episode.
I could talk about that, but and the psychology around that. But yeah.
So were there any unexpected findings, like things that through the 5 years and thousands of data points with people that you found out like, oh my God, we're also seeing this and it's helped minimize injuries, or any stories that you can share that have explained its use and how effective it is?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things recently that has bubbled up that I think is fascinating. Well, there are a couple things, and they're both related to sleep. But one of the metrics we track is called sleep debt. All right, and it's basically Whoop is going to tell you how much time you need to spend in bed in order to fully regenerate.
Got it.
And that is based on your baseline. So how you typically perform in bed.
That may help or not. I don't know.
Not that kind of performance. Sleep performance. So efficiency, consistency.
That's great.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, that's really funny. So how efficient you are at sleeping is basically kind of your baseline. So Whoop takes that into consideration. It takes into consideration your kind of circadian preference, kind of when you optimally go to bed and when you wake up. And then any naps you might have taken during the day. So if you take a nap during the day, that basically reduces how much sleep you need to spend that night.
Got it.
As long as it's not more than, an hour or an ultradian cycle of 90 minutes. I can talk more about that if you want. But so that's basically sleep need. And what we found, and whatever you don't get that night in terms of what Whoop says you needed and how much time you actually spend in bed, the metric, that delta, is called sleep debt.
Got it.
And we reveal that to the user. And what we saw is that sleep debt, if it's kept below 30 minutes, you're basically bulletproof.
Explain that again.
You don't get injured and you don't get sick.
No, I get that, but you said under 30 minutes. What do you mean by that?
So if you keep your sleep debt, so the amount of time that Whoop says you need versus what you got,
gotcha. Okay.
That delta is sleep debt.
Okay.
That's like how much you missed your sleep need by.
Got it. Okay.
So what we see in the research, and we've done a lot of work with collegiate student athletes, there's just, if you keep your sleep debt below 30, you have more days available for training, essentially, is how we measured that metric. And then the folks who are, 45 plus miss more days of training for illness, for injury, for niggles, for mental health, for a myriad of reasons. So sleep debt has kind of emerged as this metric, and it's Whoop proprietary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because sleep scientists will come at us like, oh, your sleep need is crap. It's just a random generator. But basically seeing sleep debt correlate to availability basically validates our sleep need. And then one more point on this that was just unbelievable. We did a study in partnership with University of Queensland and looking at a bunch of CEOs. And we were able to see that sleep debt correlates to executive functioning and working memory. So the more sleep debt you have, the less well your executive functioning and working memory is.
Wow. So does it look at just total time, or does it also allow through however it works? And we haven't even talked about that. I think it's an arm band, right? That people wear.
Yeah,
exactly.
24/7. There's no watch face. It's just literally collecting data. It all pushes into your app.
Yeah.
So you can open it when you want to look.
So it's easy and free and so there's that aspect of it. But does it also gauge the quality of the sleep? Because what it sounds like yours is, from what we talked about so far, it was time, but there's time and then there's also the quality of.
And that's really what your baseline kind of captures is that, I might be a real efficient sleeper. So I only have to spend 7 hours and 47 minutes in bed in order to meet my sleep need.
Got it.
Right. And it's based on the strain that day too. So that's going to move left or right a little bit, but you might be less efficient than I am. So you might need to spend 8 hours and 30 minutes in bed to get the same quality that I get from 7 hours and 47 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I love it because and it doesn't give you you need 8 hours, right? Some people might not,
Yeah. I mean, I only spend I average, I think, 20 minutes of awake time. Most people walking on the streets are probably somewhere around 90 minutes to 2 hours of awake time, right? Just because they're not monitoring it, right? So they don't know, they might know, okay, I need to keep my room cold. I need to keep it dark. I need to keep it quiet, right? But they're not really taking in all these other factors that influence the quality of your sleep, how you're managing stress throughout the day, how you're building load, all of the other things.
And when you say awake time, I don't know that I'm familiar with that. What does that mean?
Okay. So basically sleep staging. So how much time you're spending in awake, how much time you're physiologically awake. So it's not like I'm like, looking around. I might be like that, but it's more of just like, I can't even perceive that I'm awake, but I'm actually not. I don't meet the thresholds of being considered in physiological sleep.
And it has nothing to do with what how much you're awake during the day. It's during time you're supposed to sleep.
During nocturnal sleep. Yeah. So during your nighttime sleep. So awake, light, REM, and slow sleep. REM and sleep are considered kind of the deeper stages of sleep. And on Whoop, our best sleepers spend about half of the time in these deeper stages of sleep.
Yep.
And they spend about 20 to 30 minutes of time in total awake during the night. And then the rest is light sleep.
Got it.
Okay. So these folks are doing a lot of different things over the course of the day to kind of, but what's great is a lot of the behaviors that lead to that kind of quality sleep is democratically available, is like free to us, and we can talk more about the behavior stuff, when you're ready. But yeah, I think what people don't recognize is that, sleep predicts performance levels, right? And it predicts our joy and our energy and our ability to kind of show up and be present and engaged for our life. So there's, I think, a lot of incentive to try to get sleep as right as you can.
Yeah. And it, when it comes to injuries and, unfortunately we don't hope injuries come, but has there been anybody or any stories that you've got that an injury did come and it correlated to them having a bad HRV or a bad Whoop score, prior to that?
What we've seen, and, this is kind of 3 years of longitudinal data across, a few hundred student athletes, and sleep debt correlates to injury, and it correlates to illness. I guess a better way of saying it, maybe it correlates to availability, right? If you can, again, keep your sleep debt down, meet your sleep need, you will be less prone, you'll reduce your burden for illness and injury, what we've seen. The other huge finding, which I'd be remiss not to share, because it's the behavior that predicts cardiovascular resilience. Okay, so we did a huge study. It's called the Cobid Resilience Project. And Cobid was amazing because it kind of gave us this natural experiment, right? We had pre-pandemic data, and then we had quarantine data. So, and the one thing, so we were able to analyze, I think it was close to 20,000 folks participated in this study. Yeah, these are Whoop members. They filled out surveys, and we're really trying to understand mental health. And we were looking for signatures in the data to really understand, what is the signature that most predicts a good heart rate variability and a good resting heart rate. And we kind of, those two things together basically are a picture or snapshot of our cardiovascular health. The one behavior that predicted it was the degree to which the individual goes to bed and wakes up at a consistent time.
Wow. And it didn't matter what time. Within reason.
So sleep consistency. So if the individual, regularly went to bed at 10 and regularly woke up at 6, it wasn't duration, it wasn't quality, it wasn't quantity. It was consistency that was the biggest predictor of physiological resilience. Wow. And what is crazy about consistency is that it actually drives quality of sleep. And no one knows this, right? But it's a hard behavior. It is like on the Whoop platform, I think our average sleep consistency is maybe like 64%. Wow. So bad.
Well, it's like everything, I always say clients when I would start with them, I'm like, at the end of the day, frequency and consistency is what creates results. If you have enough frequency and you're consistently doing that, you're going to get results. And it could be the worst program in the world in some cases, hopefully you don't get injured, but at the end of the day, those are the two fundamental patterns. So, one last thing before we get into the kind of the I always call it the no-do gap, right? We might know the information, but now what do we do about certain things? But well-being, in my opinion, I've been talking well-being for the last 6-7 years of us moving away as an industry from just looking good in fitness to, hey, I'm okay with a 4-pack instead of a 6-pack, but I want to move. I want to have mental health. I want to be comfortable. I can't imagine that there's been so much, especially when you talked about, things like meditation and if you have a bad score or COVID or mental health, all of these different things and how that all helps people, improve their well-being. Is that something you guys are looking at? Not just because we've talked a lot and a lot of the examples are student athletes or athletes, but, general population, regular people, regular clients and how they use that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's important to note is that heart rate variability is a better predictor of your psychological status than it is your physiological status. So, you
Wow.
know, which is really interesting, right? So, yeah, I mean, everything. When we talk about mental health, and I think I think the literature is beginning to emerge and really support this. That if you don't sleep right, you are more susceptible to depression and anxiety and the myriad of kind of psychiatric disorders that that you could become susceptible to. It just makes you vulnerable as a human being, mentally, physically, emotionally. You are more vulnerable if you're not getting the sleep that you need, and you're just going to die quicker. Like it just is, there's an ocean of evidence, right? Like it's just like, so yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about like technology like this, it's not about making you, this data shouldn't make you anxious. It's just a call to action. Like it's because the world is going to be separated into two camps: people who understand their physiology, because let's face it, there is all the technology in the world to understand your physiology, right?
Yep.
You're either going to have control of your physiology and your autonomic nervous system, or you are not going to have control of your autonomic nervous system. I can tell you, the person I want leading me, I want them to have control of their autonomic nervous system, right? Like the people I want to like interact with and hang around with, they have control of their physiology, right? And we're kind of at a point in our society where it's there for us, right? And we don't always need technology. Like it's just a suite of behaviors that if we can do these things, we'll position ourselves to have more control of our autonomic nervous system. And if you have control of your autonomic nervous system, again, proxy for HRV, you're going to be able to adapt to your environment better, right? So, and sleep is it's a massive piece, right? You can't adapt your environment in a functional way, have higher HRV if your sleep isn't right. So that is the foundation.
Yeah. Well, would you mind now talking about, what are some of the recommendations? Obviously sleep is a big one. But start there. What have you seen? You mentioned, a couple of things, but I want to give the listeners, whether they're using hopefully they drive, and we'll talk about how to get to the app and how to use it and purchase and some special codes and things like that. But, what can people do in that case? And then obviously the app helps give those hints as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, if we talk about, all right, we know sleep is really important. It really, getting good sleep at night, unfortunately, starts the moment you wake up in the morning. So the behavior number one is to get out of the natural light.
Okay.
I can't underscore, and this is the basis of my PhD. Like I'm inside this data all the time. And it's already in all the literature, and we're seeing it emerge in our data very strongly that, folks who do not get exposure to morning light. So the protocol is, within 20 minutes of waking up, prior to 10 a.m., you want to spend about 10 minutes outside. And you want to look at the skyline, it's really important that your retinas kind of get on the skyline.
You mean not your phone?
Yeah. I mean, that artificial light is good. It's basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to send a pulse to the SCN, the super chiasmatic nucleus, right? And that is in our brain. And that's
say that real fast 3 more times.
I know. There's no way I can. I'm going to call it the SCN. But once your eyes hit the light, it all of a sudden it tells your body you need to be alert. And it sounds so simple, right? But what happens biologically from that one thing, it basically sets your body on fire in a good way, right? And it starts at that moment, you start to build kind of what will be pressure for sleep, right? But if we don't give our body that cue, we don't know to release cortisol. We don't know to release, like our body wants to know what to do. And the environment has all of the cues, the temperature, and the light, but we have to get ourselves out into the bright light.
And you said that was within 10 minutes of waking?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you can, but within 20 minutes if possible, get yourself outside, go for a 10-minute walk, view the skyline, drink your coffee outside, but you want to try to get about 100 lux of light prior to 10 a.m.
Okay.
So, but if you spend about 10 minutes, 15 minutes outside, and then you have the bright lights on inside, all of that will kind of add up and kind of get you to a good spot. But that is so important for mental health. It's so important for physical health. Again, there is just a downstream of activity that starts from that one behavior.
Wow.
The second behavior related to light, because we don't talk about light behavior, but it's literally the most important thing for mental health, is like our interaction with light, because it impacts our sleep so profoundly. So in addition to morning light, you also want to get outside. Basically it's called the circadian dead zone between 10 and 4 p.m. There's not really, your eyes are pretty insensitive to light at that point. But as the sun is setting, you want to get back outside. This is the other, as the sun is setting, again, get your eyeballs on that sunset. And basically that will tell your body that it's time to wind down. Mm-hmm. So that's that natural cue that, okay, it's started to come down. And then make sure in your home, you have dim lights, right? We confuse the hell out of our system by, shining bright lights when we want to be sleepy, and then not having bright lights when we want to be alert. Right. It's all about being able to kind of allow our body to be, sleepy when we need to be sleepy, and alert when we need to be alert. Right. And we can use light to help manipulate that.
And let's take it to the night. And what I was thinking too is it's funny how, you mentioned seeing a sunset, we all, is there anybody that like looks at a nice sunset and goes, I feel like crap, right? Exactly. And it's just so innate, but yet we don't put the things together. Right.
I know.
So, but beyond that too, is you'd mentioned brighter light, and, is there a time frame before you go to bed when you want to keep that light away that you found through your studies?
Yeah. We definitely see in the data, within 2 hours of when you intend to sleep, you want to make sure you've got this, filters on your screen. We don't know exactly how much that really influences the release of melatonin, which is the sleepy chemical, but we know that it probably helps, right? Because it's going to be really hard to get folks off their screens. So dim it, put the filter
blue light
on.
filter,
the blue light filter. But then also just the lights in the home too. It's just important that you're not like showering yourself with all sorts of artificial light, because it does impact. It might not impact your ability to fall asleep, but it will definitely impact the quality or the efficiency that we've been talking about. That consolidated sleep that allows us to get into those deeper stages of sleep.
Awesome.
The other behavior, and this is one of the things too, that when you asked that question about like what emerged, and I said sleep debt consistency, this is probably the third thing, is timing of meals. Has a massive impact on next day capacity and sleep. So feeding windows is another concept that is absolutely integral to just
That's interesting.
health and functioning. Yeah. I mean, we're not built to be eating nonstop, right? Like, so we just need to revisit that whole thing.
So I'm sorry, is that, I guess I'm curious to know, and I should let you continue to talk, but, with the emergence of things like intermittent fasting and different things like that, what is the recommendation that you've found?
Yeah. I mean, listening to someone like David Sinclair, I mean, if we're talking about longevity, you want to give your body, what we see in the data is that, so digestion is a highly parasympathetic activity, right? It's a parasympathetic activity. Okay. And parasympathetic is rest and digest. Sympathetic is fight or flight, right? We kind of talked about the autonomic nervous system. So in order to digest food, we need to be in a parasympathetic state. Therefore, any of the other regeneration and recovery at a cellular level, like just at a physiological level, like none of that can happen if you're digesting. Your body will divert all of the resources to go to digestion, and digestion is a very effortful task. So it's important that we're strategic about when we eat, right? Because especially if we eat, and this is kind of the third aha, alcohol is the other aha. Alcohol crushes your heart variability. I probably don't need to say that. But this aha is any food close to bedtime, like crushes your sleep. Wow. Especially food that takes a lot of effort to digest. Anything that's bioavailable close to bed, obviously no problem, right? You can digest real quick and it's not going to interfere. But if you're having a big steak, with potatoes and, and a huge salad, that's going to be hard to digest. Right. And it's going to divert all the resources away from what needs to be happening during sleep, which is recovery and rejuvenation. So you'll spend a lot less time in deeper stages of sleep, slow wave sleep in particular, which is on the front end of your sleep.
Yep.
That's the only time we release human growth hormone.
Yep.
Right. Just to be really clear. So that's when you get stronger. To your point earlier, you get stronger and faster and fitter while you're recovering, not necessarily. Right. So if you don't get into slow wave sleep, you're not getting stronger, faster, and allowing for that recovery. So feeding window. So basically stop eating by 7. Essentially, if you eat when the sun's out, you're good. And you figure out, okay, what is the feeding window that makes sense for me? Someone like David Sinclair, he's a Harvard geneticist, and he's done tons of work around this. I mean, just loads and loads. He's like the preeminent thought leader in this area. I mean, he only eats dinner and he eats when the sun's out. So he's eating one meal. So he's basically giving his body, he's in the state of autophagy for a good portion of the day, right? Which is where that, all the good things, are happening from a cellular level.
Wow. And so you said it's eat when the sun's out, you mentioned, and then to follow that up is, you said about 2 hours away. I mean, if that's not a possibility or whatever, 2 hours before you go to bed is ideal. Got it.
It would be like the hard stop, and if folks are training really hard and they get hungry, have something like a casein protein, like a cottage cheese, for example, like something that is easy to digest. Casein is really easy to digest. Now, some people have
sensitivities
about amino acids and stuff. So I'm not going to get into that. I don't want to go the pitchforks, but I could go on and on. But yes, but generally speaking, like a couple hours before bed is when you want to stop. I try to literally stop eating when the sun goes down. And they'll have a bit of tea with some cream if I'm hungry, or MCT oil. But yeah, that's kind of how I roll.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. This is great. I want to kind of end with, kind of a call to action. Obviously, we'll put in the notes, how to get to the website and links to the website, but we're also offering a discount on the membership. I think there's currently a discount on the product itself, but would you just do a quick overview of product to, membership, and give an overview of what that costs? And then obviously if you come to the site and watch it, you'll be able to get those discounts.
Shoot. This is actually, I can tell I'm the scientist. I'm not.
Okay.
Okay. It's a monthly membership. So really what you're paying for is like the data and the insights and the coaching. And that's a monthly fee. So you're not paying for hardware. You're just paying for the subscription.
Okay.
And I know there's a lot of codes out there, but use the lifetime code. And that's really it. Sweet. And
so within the membership, you get the actual device.
Yep. The device is just part of the membership.
Sweet. And then just download the app. Awesome.
Basically it's $30 and you get the whole shebang.
Okay. That's fantastic.
Well,
it's been a pleasure. And I think I'd love to have you on again at some point and just really deep into some more of the science of sleep and things like that. And one thing I want to make sure that I talk about before we go is just the concept of meditation and the impact it has, on lowering stress. And one thing I didn't put together that I wanted to say before we go is so many people stop meditation because they don't think it's doing anything. But yet this product will allow you to see the power, if you do it consistently enough, what it can do to your autonomic nervous system, and specifically lowering the sympathetic tone to come to parasympathetic. And you can see that as you do it more and more and at the right times. And I wanted to make sure I got that in there before we say goodbye.
Yeah, that definitely would have been, probably I talked about feeding window and, light behavior, exercise timing also is really interesting, but there's no question that proactively managing your stress throughout the day with mindful breathing or meditation, no question that will help you have a better night's sleep at night. Gratitude journaling at night is another behavior that is super helpful. Consistency. You don't have to be perfect, right?
Exactly.
Like, we're saying
don't make it a stress.
That's right. It's just wake up in the morning, get outside. I mean, these things are good for us, right? They're good for our mental health. And again, like you want to be that on the side that has control of their autonomic nervous system, right? Because that improves your ability to survive, right, in this crazy world, right?
Awesome.
Like it's going to make you stronger immunity. It's going to make you mentally stronger, more resilient, physically. You're not as prone to injury. So there's a lot of reasons, and I think too, like you can, in terms of Whoop, like you can track all of these behaviors in the journal and see how those data correlate to the objective metrics. So you actually do get to see the progress. Right?
Awesome.
It's really cool.
Well, that's fantastic. And I can't thank you enough. There's been just, again, use technology to your advantage. And this is one that, especially if you're struggling with any of the things we talked about, getting ill too often, having too much stress, not getting results from your workout, this is the thing you want to try.
People don't realize that the key to losing weight is to get your sleep right.
Yep.
Right? We literally are, if we are carrying sleep debt, i.e. not meeting our sleep need, we'll take on a good 300 more calories without even knowing it.
Wow.
Right, throughout the day, which is insane, right? So our ghrelin and leptin, we don't know, am I hungry, am I full? Like it's really hard to perceive. As a result, we end up craving foods that are not as good for us.
Well, it was a pleasure having the chat with you, and look forward to hopefully a strong relationship as we move forward as well.
Yeah, same. Really
Thank you.
proud to have you guys in our ecosystem.